Colleagues, friends, let us start with this very important event, which is, I think, a very crucial session for the post-2015 or the 2030 transformative agenda, because this meeting is about the people, and we want in this meeting to listen to the people. And for that purpose, I think we have joined together today with governments of different parts of the world that are going to tell us, you, the people of the world, how they are planning to organize their implementation for this agenda of, that has been so clearly adopted in this session. I'm Alicia Bárcena. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here. Because, you know, many of us, and I can see some of our old friends sitting here, I can find very clearly Ashok Koshla, Barbara Pyle. We started, didn't we, in 1992 with Agenda 21. So can you imagine how many years we have been fighting for this? And that was the first time when the doors were open for the civil society, widespread. So that's why today, after all these years, we have to make sure that this agenda is going to be really transformative, and we have to rely on you, the representatives of the civil society, to make sure that we have to establish a new equation, a new equilibrium between the state, the market, and the society. It's proven today that the market alone cannot make it. And we know perfectly that the private sector, of course, they might have the money, the capital, etc., but they cannot do it alone. And of course, we know also the governments cannot do it alone. No, they can't. So what is needed here is a powerful, very powerful civil society that has to stand, and has to stand at local, national, and global levels. So we really need this to make a new architecture. What we need, and this organization, by the way, is the first that has to change because it's 70 years old, fine. We are all very happy of its existence, but we have to have a renewed organization if we're really going to make a change, and we need that change. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think, of course, that we're very happy to have our 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we know that everything more or less is in it, but now comes the real question. How are we going to implement this, and what do we need for its implementation, and how civil society is going to make sure that everybody is going to be keeping its own promise. So that's, I think, the whole purpose of this consultation, and I really want to thank the governments that have agreed to be here today to present, I would say, because these governments have made a lot of breakthroughs, and I'm going to introduce each one of them at the right moment. And we have prominent figures with us today here, and I have to say, you know, when we see how many heads of state are in this occasion here, how many people are here, how many people were yesterday in the Central Park, how many people is around this Sustainable Development Agenda, when we saw our building in the colors of the 17 SDGs, frankly, we have to feel a very profound emotion. But we also need to be very realistic because the world is difficult. The world is getting very complex. We are in the midst of a huge change. And we are the first generation that is understanding this more clearly. But we are also the first species in the planet that is the only one that is growing. You know, the human beings, we're going from 7 to 9 billion people, but the rest of the species are going down and being depleted. Are we going to be alone in 2050? Is that the case of the matter? And that's the thing. That we are this is the first generation that has the evidence that we cannot continue being extractivist, that we have to really pursue a more equal society, that we really have to finish with the culture of privileges and move into a culture of equality, that we need to move from extractivism to a truly sustainable development arena, and that we have to stop the concentration of wealth in very few hands. So, it is my great pleasure, really, to be accompanied by very prominent people today. And basically, I really want to thank Beyond 2015, because, oh, President, please, very welcome, because you're going to be the first, you know.
Okay.
But not yet. Not yet, but you are going to come in very soon.
I can wait.
Yes. Well, you see, because we are here to listen to the civil society, we're going to give the floor first to one of our main civil society representatives, Mr. President. But let me tell you that one of the things that I want to very clearly share with you is that Beyond 2015 has called on two things, and that is time to include and time to act. And let me add two times, time to prove and time to move. So it's time, and from my perspective, from the Latin American and Caribbean region, it's time for equality. You see, we are not the poorest region of the world, but we are the most unequal region of the world, and that's not possible. So we have to move into that era of inclusion, and inclusion needs also sharing of information, openness in all fronts. So really, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this event and to ask the first speaker to come along, but please, let me just ask you a big favor. Of course, the governments have 5 minutes each, and I have two very beautiful cards here, an orange and a red. And the orange is 30 seconds before you finish, so you can wrap up, okay? So 5 minutes for the governments, 3 minutes for the civil society interventions, if you be so kind, because all of us, I'm sure, we want to leave at 2:30 and be at 3 prompt to listen what the heads of state are going to say this afternoon on the post-2015, starting with President Obama, who's going to be there at 3 p.m. So my first speaker is Philip Schonrock. So Philip, I know you are going to do us a big issue because you're going to tell us, you're going to set the scene of what exactly we have to expect from this session. Please, Philip, you have the floor.
That actually works. Good afternoon again. Thank you, Secretary, Your Excellencies, colleagues from civil society, all protocol observed. I'm here on behalf of Beyond 2015 to highlight how this work has been in the last 5 years, how we have tried to have a transformative agenda and how different platforms of civil society have been able to achieve that this is an inclusive agenda, and that for the last 5 years we have been calling for, and especially during the last ANGA, a high level of ambition and a call for participation. But by January, we are optimistic what we are seeing and what was approved by the heads of states just of the beginning of the summit, but have no illusions. The challenge is implementation, and that's where we have to discuss today. The challenge of implementation, we are talking about multidimensional poverty measurement. We are talking about an implementation that has indicators that actually address those points that the Secretary was mentioning about inequality and being able to really be transformative. We have to challenge our governments, but I believe also that we have to challenge civil society. We all have to be accountable, and we all need to be accountable to take this back on a domestic level. Now the work, and I actually feel for a vacation, but at this very moment we are starting our work. It's beginning at this very moment to take it back to the national and subnational level to our governments and to be inclusive, to be with a multi-stakeholder approach in order to implement it. The 5 governments who are sitting in front of us are vanguard countries that are taking this serious, that are already doing work on the implementation side. And this is why we are very optimistic that these 5 countries will give us and set actually the scene on how are the first steps to implement it, and that the start is a start which is strong, which is inclusive, and which actually is looking for
energy efficiency.
Well, we have a little surprise for you. Alicia is going to sing now. Well, I think it was you, Alicia, to say it is time, my 3 minutes are over. Thank you very much. But well, thank you then, again.
It was not that, really. I mean,
and we can salute for over 15 minutes and talk about 17 goals, 169 targets, and probably 1,000 other reasons what we want to discuss today. But I think now it's time to listen to the governments, and then I will be attentive. If the lights go on or off again, I will talk again. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Philip. Actually, I want to thank the organizers, because if you are going to help me to keep time that way, I think we're going to have a very efficient panel. But really, I don't think this was the whole point. But anyway, let me tell you that this event has two components. We're going to listen first then to the governmental representatives about their plans, and including, I would say, what are they thinking on the indicators? Because we are all very concerned about it, aren't we? We feel that we need them, of course, but we don't want them to be conditions at the same time. And we want the countries and everybody to feel that they are designing them and so forth. So they're going to tell us about that. And then, of course, the second part, we will hear from the organizations from all over the world. How do they see this thing? So to start our first panel, it gives me a great honor and privilege, really, to introduce His Excellency Dr. Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, President of the United Republic of Tanzania. Thank you, Mr. President, for being here and for being in the summit and for being, Tanzania has been so active that we really are looking forward to listening to you, Mr. President. The floor is yours.
Well, I thank you, Madam Moderator. I thank the organizers for associating me with this high-level meeting on a very pertinent theme on the implementation of the newly adopted post-2015 development agenda. It is important to me to meet and discuss ways we can forge partnership and collaboration that will galvanize critical political will for their implementation. We may wish to recall that during the formulation of the MDGs, there was limited involvement and participation of other stakeholders beyond governments, private sector, and civil society in particular. It is gratifying that this time around the participation of civil society and private sectors was ensured in the formulation process of the post-2015 development agenda. The national process, in the case of Tanzania, the national process for formulating the post-2015 development agenda ensured ownership of the process and the agenda itself. My government adopted a bottom-up approach to involve all stakeholders, starting from the village, the districts. The Planning Commission, which is under my office in collaboration with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Finance, held different seminars, workshops that brought together different stakeholders to share ideas on our country's position and charter the way forward. Currently, Tanzania is going through a medium-term national planning activity. This is therefore an opportune time for us to integrate the new agenda in our development strategies. The government is formulating the second five-year development plan that will focus on nurturing an industrial economy in realizing our development vision. So parallel to the domesticating and integrating the agenda in our national strategies, we are committed to undertaking regular follow-up and review of the implementation process. Currently, the Tanzania National Bureau of Statistics is engaged in the task of formulating indicators that will be used at the national level during the evaluation process. These indicators will act as the dashboard and thus keep us focused on achieving the goals. It is my hope that we will all seriously commit to implementation of the SDGs and endeavor to ensure the success of our new undertaking. I'm going to emphasize that the onus to implement the goals lies on all of us. As we all participate in the SDGs formulation, we ought to come together in the implementation. Long gone are the days when civil society and private sector sit on the fence doing finger pointing. It's about time that you become part of the solution. It is time also to move from mere advocacy to action. Let's work together to make sure that we leave no one behind. Thank you.
Wow. President. Wow. He didn't even took the 5 minutes. But I'm going to take 1 minute just to highlight something, Mr. President, about what you have done in your life. And since you haven't used your 5 minutes, maybe you can tell me, how do you see this? Because you have been very closely linked to energy and to minerals. You have been linked to water, and you have been a member of parliament, energy. So this has been your formation. But you also were the Minister of Finance. So, and you are now saying that you're going to include this in your national planning, and you have the Bureau of Statistics. What about the budget, Mr. President? And what about this industrialization process of how do we move from the commodity-based economies to a more diversified type of economies? And what do we need from the developed countries, Mr. President? Allow me to take that minute that we have. President.
Well, let me, of course, I've had a number of portfolios in government, Minister of Water, Energy and Minerals. I've done finance, I've done foreign affairs for 10 years, and now president for 10 years, and in 4 weeks' time, I'll be retiring and become a prominent Tanzanian citizen.
Global citizen.
Well, of course, our biggest challenge is really how to wrestle ourselves from poverty. Tanzania is one of the least developed countries. So our task really has been how to move from an LDC to a middle-income country. My predecessor put in place a Vision 2025. When I came into office, what I did is to develop a long-term perspective plan, divided into 3 5-year development plans. We have implemented the first 5-year development plan. We are now formulating the second 5-year development plan, which fortunately coincides with the promulgation of the SDGs. So this is the point I was saying in my speech, that to us it means therefore that we are going to factor the objectives of the SDGs in the objectives of the second 5-year plan, development plan, which we are formulating. Of course, in what we have done, in the first 5-year plan, the main aim has been unlocking the growth potential of Tanzania, which we have done very well, because we have invested a lot in infrastructure development, in education, in health, and so on. The second is now looking at industrialization, beneficiation of our natural resources instead of exporting them raw. So we are aiming at becoming an industrial nation. And the third 5-year plan is enhancing our competitiveness in the regional and the global marketplace. So this is what we are really doing, and well, it augurs well with, fortunately, the SDGs have come in good time. We have 2 plans ahead of us. We're definitely going to factor that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I really appreciate very much your willingness to tell us these things that are so crucial for the implementation process. And you know, planning is back, my dear friends. Really. You know what? Because we used to say that planning this and that and the other, but planning is back. So, and we are planning, and the governments are establishing plans of action long-term, with the vision of the long-term, 2030, 2050, etc. So this is why Colombia has been another of the countries that have been selected, and we have the privilege of having Simón Gaviria, who is the director of the National Planning Department. So what happens is that in Africa, planning, in Latin America, planning, and Colombia has made a breakthrough, because it's the first plan that has included, I attested for that, has included the SDGs. So we are very pleased to have you here, Simón. And as you said, also this integration of the statistics and the planning and the, you know, how are we going to measure this in the future? And so, Simón, please tell us how you're doing this in Colombia.
And thank you, Alicia, and thank you for everything, for your leadership and for your directfulness, which is always welcome. And it really is welcome. Well, let me tell you a story of Colombia. Colombia was deeply involved in proposing the SDGs. It was actually Paula Caballero, who's sitting right here. It was her idea. She's the mother of the SDGs. Colombia was very involved in the long and arduous process of not only why we needed SDGs, but also how they needed to be constructed. And so as a country, we were very aware of this in the process, and therefore we had a time window of our National Development Plan, which happened previous to the General Assembly. So we had to include and learn by doing the process of introducing SDGs into Colombian legislation. I just want to point out some of the challenges, right? It's 169 targets, right? Between existing legislation and existing programs and new ones we needed to develop, Colombia was able to achieve 121 of the goals in our budget, in our budgetary plans. So what that means is that we identify the problem, we look at existing programs, and then we go into the appropriation into the budget for approximately 121 of the metrics. And that leaves 68 metrics that we have left. However, we're keenly aware that the programs we have can have a lot of social innovation going forward. And we're starting to have that conversation with different actors in society. How do we improve our current spending to be more impactful on goals and targets set up not only by the SDGs, but also by national priorities? Of that, we found 24 metrics, additional metrics, that we can't measure. Either we don't have a methodology or we don't have the base information in order to measure. And therefore, we require a lot of work in open data, in big data, not only with the private sector, the national government needs to change, and also with civil society, right? A lot of effort on that regard, gathering information. And finally, we have 34 other metrics out of the SDGs that are not country specific, right? They don't depend upon a single country, right? And I'm gonna paraphrase something that Paula said, which is gonna have to make us change the way we do things, right? You know, in the past, we had in Latin America, we had a debate on the Washington Consensus, right? And the Washington Consensus, whether it was right or it was wrong, whatever, it was policy-centric, right? So the debate was on policy. So when we got into policy, politics became an obstacle. Then when we set up the MDGs, right, it was results-driven, right? So pretty much we're telling everybody, you can do whatever you want, right? Experiment, but give us this result. And the game changer of SDGs is that it's a change in trajectory. It means doing things differently. And that's the biggest effort of the SDGs. You know, once we look at it, you know, and one thing that I'm going to pick up on Alicia's comments is that we really need change and reform on global institutions, especially the UN. And we need global change because in order to meet those issues, migration, genetics, free trade, either the UN needs to change the way it relates to other foreign institutions, but also current institutions in the UN need to adapt. And we need strategic planning to make sure those UN agencies especially are geared towards meeting SDGs. Second regard is the importance of state and municipal actors, especially governors and mayors. In our experience, for example, health, education, water are decentralized from the local government. So many times when you get a national government to be proactive and stay involved, you need somewhat of a sandwich strategy, right? Pressure from the top and pressure from below to make sure we get local governments involved in this. We are actually working with civil society. We actually invited directly Philip. We set a high-level committee which meets regularly and evaluates these policies. And we give not only transparency to our numbers, transparency to our decisions, but also we get feedback from civil society on everything we do regarding SDGs. And just finally, because there's this criticism on SDGs regarding how complex and comprehensive they are, right? That it would have been easier, less targets. But when something is complex and something is difficult, like public policy and the world we're facing, you need complex and difficult solutions. And so in a lot of these issues, anyway, they're going to be in our budget, they're going to be in regulation, or they're going to be in our taxes. So it's convenient to have a broad palette in order to pick and choose and have guidance towards this change in trajectory. And just to end, these are so comprehensive. Colombia, it's in the middle of a peace process. Right? It's something we're going to end in March, final agreement of peace. And the narrative of peace of Colombia has been this one. The peace process is going to end the conflict. But after we end the conflict, we need to build peace. Okay? So we did a matrix of SDGs, and we crossed it with our peace agreement. And 47 SDGs directly impact and are linked and mentioned in the peace process. So that will give you a sense of the comprehensiveness and the importance in setting the priorities that were selected in SDGs.
Wow. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. Very important. This connection between peace and sustainable development, we're going to see it be improved by Colombia, and I think this is going to be a breakthrough because you also have another thing which is territorial information. And I think territory counts, and sometimes we don't pay sufficient attention on the geographical information. I think you have done a breakthrough. But something that is going to happen tomorrow, guys, and it's going to happen by the countries that are here today. Tomorrow we're going to have, regarding the importance of data and data revolution, tomorrow there's going to be the launch of the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data. And the leadership is Kenya, Colombia, Mexico, and the US. And this is going to be tomorrow. And it's about how the civil society and the people should appropriate information and data. So you are making a breakthrough there also, Mr. Gaviria. Thank you very, very much. And it's really a pleasure to continue on this process of planning, and I have requested the Minister of Planning of Kenya to speak first before Indonesia, because I know you're getting ready, my friend, because you just came running in the room, and I know it's horrible when they give you the floor when you just came. So we're going to have the pleasure of listening to Gideon Mailu, who is the Director of Planning of the Ministry in Kenya, and he also led the coordination of the implementation of the MDGs since 2005. So I think this transition from MDG to SDG is also very important because it's not only about, what's different between the MDGs and the SDGs. It's also, I believe, this is me, of course, I believe that this is to move from what I would call an agenda that was a little bit prescriptive to the South, saying you have to do 1 to 7 and we will help you with MDG number 8. And now we have a universal agenda. Everybody has to do something on this one. And it's integrated. It has a vision. So, Minister Mailu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm going to be very brief, and I will start by saying that we have finished the process of MDGs, but there is still unfinished business. It has taken us 15 years. We have another 15 years to implement the SDGs. We had good excuses of saying the MDGs were top-bottom approach. This time, we have all participated, and I'm happy that from Kenya, we have several representatives of non-government organizations here. We have involved our people, they have participated, and we have come up with position on the SDGs. So we own the SDGs as a country. We have also ensured that we mainstream the SDGs before they were adopted 2 days ago. We have the Vision 2030, and we have the medium-term plan. We have already mainstreamed SDGs in our blueprints. What do we need to do to implement the SDGs? You'll all agree with me that we need to create awareness. At global level, there's a lot of awareness creation. At national level, there is to an extent. But at the lower levels, I think that awareness is not there. We need to create awareness, advocacy, publicity among all development stakeholders. What is popular cannot be forgotten. We have to mainstream SDGs in policy, planning, and the budgeting process. We have to enhance resource allocation to the unfinished business of the MDGs that covers SDGs 1 to 5. New areas covers SDGs 6 to 11. The Green Agenda covers SDGs 12 to 15. Governance and peace, SDG 16. Means of implementation is very crucial. We need to mobilize resources. There will be need to ring fence. We dedicate funding for the most crucial areas of the SDGs, especially the unfinished business of the MDGs, which is mainly to touch on the people, the human. At the same time, governments in collaboration with all development stakeholders should mobilize resources to tackle emerging issues, including emergencies. I want to talk a little bit about the civil society organizations out of the experience we had during the implementation of the MDGs. We tried as a government to create awareness at the national, local levels, and we found it extremely difficult until we had to engage 28 civil society organizations to reach the people at the grassroots level. From that time, we have accepted that we cannot do this business alone. The civil society organizations, the UN agencies, development partners, foundations, they need to be on board. In order to realize the SDGs and complete the unfinished business of the MDGs, we need everybody to participate. We need to develop the targets. The participation of the civil society organization among other stakeholders is therefore very crucial. Why am I saying this? There's what civil society organizations can say, and there's what governments say. There is a difference. We need each other. Some of the civil society organizations will do better in advocacy and awareness creation, while others will be involved in action-oriented activities of achieving the SDGs. Government and civil society organizations will need to work together from the onset of these goals during the SDGs period. There is need to minimize resources on time taken in publicity and awareness creation, and therefore leave no room for intervention. Possible sequence. What have we done as a country? From here, we are going to undertake sensitization, domestication and localization of the SDGs, planning and strategies, costing, resource mobilization, implementation, and also monitor and report on the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Kenya has also made a lot of breakthroughs on data, and I think that's going to be a powerful tool, I guess, to bring this to the people. We are now going to have the privilege of hearing also from another part of the world, which is Asia, the Republic of Indonesia, and that's for me a privilege to give the floor to Januar Nugroho, deputy of the priority program management of the presidential office. So it means that the president's office is directly involved in this follow-up. So we're looking forward to listen to you, sir. Please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I've prepared some slides actually just to help orient my share with you. I know that the time is limited, so if someone can help put the slides up there, perhaps it can help. But if not, that's okay. I would start from the MDGs facts in Indonesia, because I think what we have today now, we have to learn from what we have achieved during the MDGs and what we could have done better. Because sometimes the reality just bites. Despite, well, I'll just share the experience in my country. We have been working very closely, for example, with line ministries like Ministry of Health, for example, and then we realized that we still could do a lot better, for example, in reducing the maternal mortality. With the Ministry of Public Works, when we have to be able to improve access to clean water and basic sanitation, for example, and lots more. But what I would like to share with you here is that our government, especially this new president, is very much, how would I put it? That the national vision of this new government is aligned with what we have in SDGs. In Indonesia, we have the ideals called Nawacita, meaning 9 ideals of this new government. And when we try to plot, when we try to map with this with the SDGs, it's remarkable that these national visions, which basically developing from the periphery, very much align with the spirit of leaving no one behind, for example, in the SDGs. And this is very encouraging for us. So the Office of the President, we are entrusted to be working together with line ministries, and we got the mandate from the government, and we got the message that at the national level, the implementation of the SDG will be coordinated through the Ministry of Development Planning. So it is one, I think, step ahead, I think one bold step that this new government already took. There are 3 pillars that I would like to share to you how we plan to move forward. 1, in mainstreaming SDGs into national development agenda, we need to have, first of all, policy and regulatory framework. Without this, it is very difficult to coordinate, to orchestrate the work of line ministries, especially local governments, in mainstreaming these SDGs. Mind you, we have more than 17,000 islands. We have more than 254 million people span across, well, you know, 8.1 million kilometers square area. So we need to have this. Second, we need to have institutional framework at place to ensure that SDGs are implemented in ministries, local governments, but also ensuring public participations. I think we are kidding ourselves if the government alone can work on this. No way. We have to ensure that public is involved. And it means civil society, media, academia, business, everyone. We need everyone to be on board if we want to implement this. Third, accountability mechanism framework. This is important because the devil is always in the details. How can a government claim they have achieved this or that? And I think here, mechanism of monitoring, evaluation, and reporting are crucial. The role of data, not only because we are promoting this open data, open government movement, not only about that, but also because we realize that accountability mechanism is at the heart when we want to achieve this sustainable development goals. So I think I would stop here because what we want here is to have more discussion on this. But when you talk about the political commitment from the government, yes, I think, and I can say firmly that Indonesia is on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, is very important. I think you raise very crucial questions, and I really think that the civil society will definitely probably challenge all of the panelists, I suppose, and you should. But let me welcome Amina Mohamed, who is another of the mothers of this post-2015, this transformative agenda, and thank you, Amina, for being with us this afternoon. Now, we're going to hear from Sweden, and we have here the pleasure of having Ambassador Kasia Olofsgård. I hope I'm pronouncing the right way. You are the ambassador for the post-2015. Now, I suppose you're going to become the ambassador of the Transformative 2030 agenda. And also, your country has made a big push. We heard the other day that you convened a meeting with all the heads of state, and you were saying that this is to move forward, and I don't remember the exact name that you put in the session, but it was great. So, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting Sweden to take part of this very important and timely meeting on implementation, because that is really where everything begins right now. And just as you pointed to, let me start with saying that to the Swedish government, the 2030 agenda is of very high importance and priority. It is important for our national policy, and it is important, of course, when it comes to our international commitments. And just as you pointed to, one of the expressions of this engagement from the government was the launch of the high-level support group that we had the other day. And I'm very pleased that we have some of the other member countries of that support group here today in Tanzania and Colombia joining us. We think this could be important. It could be important since it sends a signal of a political commitment at the highest level. But it's just as important in the way that it provides a basis and a platform for exchanging experience and solutions between governments and civil society and the breadth of civil society. The 2030 agenda, to a very large extent, really goes along the same lines as many of the policy issues that the Swedish government has put in front of itself. Just to name one example, we have this goal not to leave any of the environmental challenges to the next generation. We need to solve them at this generation has to solve them. And also, of course, we stand firm on the commitment of 1% of gross national income to ODA, and we are the largest donor per capita to the Green Climate Fund. But this is only a basis, of course. Now we want to use the 2030 agenda to take this further. And when doing this, we believe that it's important to combine different perspectives. We need to be strategic, have a long perspective on policy issues, remember the vision that brought us here, but we need to combine that with very concrete and specific politics on the ground, and very often on the local level. That is why each and every minister in the Swedish government will be responsible for integrating the 2030 agenda into his or her policy area. But this is also why we need to keep a whole-of-government approach. We will have regular whole-of-government meetings in order to ensure that the Prime Minister, to whom this is very much a priority, to ensure that he will keep the lead for this work. And we will also appoint some specific ministers to have a specific responsibility. And one of them being the Minister for Public Administration. That might sound special, but the idea of this is that he is the one responsible for what happens in the municipalities and the communities. And he will also have a specific responsibility for integrating what we are doing nationally on the implementation. The Foreign Ministry, and specifically the Minister for International Cooperation, of course, will have a specific responsibility to coordinate what we do on the international scene. We are right now together with or on the basis of consultation with civil society, mainstreaming our framework for international cooperation so that we have the 2030 agenda as the leading perspective when it comes to international cooperation. But maybe even more important is the policy coherence for sustainable development. That will be the main tool for assuring that we mainstream the 2030 in our international commitments. Sweden's new government also has a Minister for Strategy and Future. And this minister has been organizing her secretariat really along the results of the Open Working Group since she took office. And she will have a specific responsibility for this more strategic and long-term think on how we have to change, how we have to reform society and politics. And she has also gathered a select group of ministers to influence the work on this mainstreaming, as well as an independent group of knowledgeable representatives from academia. Maybe even more important is that to help the government, we are setting up a national committee. And the thought behind this national committee will be to communicate with the broad society, but even more important, to join forces between government and civil society. We have a very strong engagement from civil society. And when I say civil society, it's all of you being present here. It's the traditional civil society organizations, but it's also academia, and it's also business and trade unions. And without this cooperation, we will not be able to neither formulate our visions nor implement the 2030 agenda.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Sweden has been one of the few countries that kept up this promise of the 1% of the ODA, so we really would like to encourage you to continue that commitment and to go further, I think. So thank you very much. Time is coming now to listening to the civil society. And I'm very pleased to have here a group that is a very, very representative group. And we will start with Emel Duturaga, which she represents the Pacific Island Association of Non-Governmental Organizations. So important, the resilience, the small island development states. What do you expect from the implementation? So Emil, you have the floor. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Moderator. Firstly, can I say that transforming our world is ambitious, but within our reach. Only less than 72 hours ago, Pope Francis, Shakira, and Angelique rocked, would you believe, the United Nations General Assembly Hall. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, defying business as usual has to be the agenda for the next 15 years. Thanks to the UN major group mechanisms, UNGLS, and global partnerships such as Beyond 2015, the IFP, CPDE, Piango, and Pacific Island civil society contributed to, promoted debate on, and share ownership of Agenda 2030, one which we have translated to Pacific 2030 in my region. But it's time to shift from global policy dialogue to concrete national actions for full implementation of the agenda. It is heartening to hear commitments from our government leaders, but we need clear commitment for processes and institutional arrangements for civil society stakeholders to meaningfully engage, especially women, youth, the elderly, people with disabilities, indigenous peoples, rural and outer island communities, and other vulnerable and marginalized groups who have traditionally been left behind. An enabling environment for civil society development effectiveness is critical, including freedom of assembly and association, freedom of the press and other forms of the media, to ensure that civil society as independent development actors effectively contribute to national and local sustainable development plans and actions. I'm pleased to share that Pacific Island Forum leaders recently expressed support and commitment to the implementation of SDGs. Notwithstanding the universality of the SDGs, Pacific leaders emphasized a country-driven process in tailoring the global indicators to better reflect the Pacific context and to ensure that regional indicators monitor our own progress in coherence with our framework for Pacific regionalism and implementation of small island developing states, Samoa pathway. For Pacific Seeds, climate change exacerbates all the indicators, and it remains the single greatest threat to the livelihood, security, and well-being of the peoples of the Pacific. Irreversible loss and damage, forced displacement of island populations, call for the adoption of an ambitious and legally binding agreement at Paris COP21 in December to limit global average temperature increase to below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and transitioning towards decarbonization. Madam Moderator, there are other issues such as the quest for self-determination, political independence for Kanlaki and Bougainville, ending human rights violations in West Papua. But as you said at the beginning, people and not profit must be front and center of the new agenda where human rights, gender equality and environment sustainability and economic justice are the core of our pursuit for sustainable development. Our stewardship of this planet holds us accountable for what we are borrowing from future generations, and I thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow. How can you say so many things in these 3 minutes? I can't believe this. Thank you very much, Emil. And we turn to Alejandro Barrios from Bolivia. He, I think, has a vision of how, because he has been the Secretary for People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty. Great. We have food security in the SDGs, not hunger only, food security. So Alejandro, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Alicia Bárcena, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm speaking on behalf of Evento International, the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and the CSO Partnership for Effectiveness Development. We recognize and appreciate the enormous efforts put during these last 3 years, but forgive us if many of us do not welcome this new agenda with the same enthusiasm than others. And do not mistake our cautionary stance with cynicism and despair. No one wants more to transform the world more than the billions of people who are not simply left behind, but pushed back. Pushed back by what Pope Francis describes as, and I quote, the system which tends to devour everything that stands in the way of increased profits. The 2030 Agenda for Development, for Sustainable Development is not an agenda for transformation. It fails to challenge existing relations of power and wealth distribution. And while the 2030 Agenda contains much by way of promises, real hope lies elsewhere, in the people challenging the existing economic and political order. In that sense, after this agenda was adopted by our states, during the implementation period, we, as civil society organized, have enormous challenges ahead. We must challenge our governments to bear their primary responsibility for ensuring people's rights over corporate rights, to tackle inequalities and the concentration of wealth by redistributing it, to ensure the right to participation of CSOs as independent and rightful actors while enabling environment for action, to implement the agenda with coherence, to the UN system, to ensure an equitable partnership to CSOs among all development actors with due recognition of our rights and roles in all processes of policy formulation, implementation, review, and monitoring of SDGs at all levels. To ourselves for the implementation period. Let's all put away our suits, and believe me, that is a challenge. And let's get closer to the ground with the vulnerable people, empower and accompany them in their daily struggle for living well. For the following years, civil society, let's be alert of what the governments and corporations are also currently negotiating, new free trade deals across regions. And I suggest a specific and important way to enhance accountability and people participation in the 2030 Agenda is to ensure participatory human rights impact assessments of development programs and projects, including public-private partnership. Likewise, there should be participatory ex-ante impact assessments of free trade agreements to make sure they do not undermine the realization of human rights and the SDGs. And finally, self-recognize and value the power that the people have in their hands. The real political leadership at local and national level is there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for reminding us about the public good. I think it's very important. Tanya Cox, you have been very close to the children's rights and to the women's rights, and in Europe you have done a tremendous job. Tanya, you have the floor.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Is this working? You can hear me? Go closer? Perfect. So now it's time to deliver for people and planet. Implementing Agenda 2030 has got to be a common effort, a global effort, but because I come from Europe, I want to focus on the universality aspect of this agenda and what richer countries need to be doing. Firstly, as European leaders are going to be putting in place the processes to draw up national sustainable development strategies, or whatever they end up being called, we call on you not to cherry-pick between the goals and the targets. Prioritization's okay. Selection is not. Agenda 2030 isn't a menu of options. All countries need to implement all the goals and targets. Secondly, we urge you to implement the spirit of the declaration while you're trying to achieve the letter of the goals and targets. Let me give you an example of what I mean. The phrase "leave no one behind" has become a motto of the SDGs. What does it mean in a richer country context? It means that we have got to focus massively on improving equality. Equality between peoples in our own countries, between peoples across the countries of Europe, and of course between Europe and the rest of the world. And yes, we have got huge gaps in Europe too. If we're going to do that, do we need to think differently about what constitutes progress? Because economic growth doesn't mean progress for the vast majority of people in Europe. And our growth models are doing an awful lot of harm to the environment. To us, in Beyond 2015 Europe, it's obvious that it's not possible for every country in the world to keep growing ad infinitum, and for us to remain within planetary boundaries. So in European countries, we should rather be looking to change our lifestyles. We're suggesting that we should adopt a new measure of progress based on well-being. Thirdly, a universal agenda implies that richer countries must support less well-off countries through financial and non-financial means in order so that they can achieve the goals and targets in their context. So we urge you to be much clearer about what support you'll provide, to whom, when and how. Lastly, European countries and other richer countries must make sure that none of their policies or actions impact negatively on other people's prospects for achieving sustainable development, nor on their country's abilities to realise their people's human rights. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our futures are intricately linked. That's why we must all act, and act together, and act in the interests of people and planet. Poverty and inequality aren't accidents of fate. They're the results of specific power relations and the decisions made by people in positions of power. We, European civil society, call on you, world leaders, to make the right decisions now, to work tirelessly to make equality, well-being and human rights a reality for everyone, and to make sure we stop harming the environment on which we all depend for our future. Only in this way will you transform our world. Thank you.
Wow. Tanya, we have to take all of you to the plenary, you know, actually. Oh, my goodness. Eni Lestari, an Indonesian domestic helper, migrant rights activities, migrant rights activities. Can you, activists, can we imagine now that migration is such an important topic, and it's not in our agenda, by the way. So, please, you have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leaving no one behind is a mantra of the UN Sustainable Development Agenda, but we would need to see a monumental shift in policy and attitude to make this meaningful for the 232 million migrants and more than 50 million refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced people. As a migrant domestic worker from Indonesia, I must leave everyone behind. My visa doesn't allow me to reunite with my family or even to change to other type of job. I'm permanently at risk, and always left behind. The heightened security, militarized border, offshore detention center, boats left adrift at sea, wars which are all designed to leave migrants behind. So will the Sustainable Development Goals address the root causes of migration, and will migrants to be part of national and global implementation plans? People like me don't migrate because we want to. We migrate because the policies of austerity, of the land grabbing, of globalized capitalism produce poverty, push down wages, and leave us with no choice. We migrate because climate change, caused by consumption, and also wealth accrual by the rich, displaces people and causes resource war. Migrants and refugees don't put our children into dangerous boat, into cages, airless containers, put their lives in the hands of smugglers, and go into lifetime levels of debt because they want to. They do it because the fusion of globalization, militarism, and fundamentalism makes survival impossible back home. The SDGs include few targets referring to migration, but it doesn't include target 8.8 that promises to protect rights and secure working environments for migrant workers. But the proposed indicator will simply measure how many dead and injured workers there are. We want more than reduced death. We want living wage. We want to measure how many workers are able to join unions and collectively bargain. We want full employment and decent work both in our own countries and countries where we work. We want to measure criminalization and discrimination against migrants. We want to replace economies designed for the rich and corporations with economies that share our wealth, support the common good, and deliver development justice. Migration is not a tool for development. It is a result of maldevelopment. Remittances are not a development tool replacing state obligation. They are the crops of exploitation. Migrants were left behind in the opening plenary. The international community response to the current refugee and migrant crisis will be the true test of the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Very powerful. Jobs, equal. I mean, you know, labor and jobs is like the master key also for emancipation. Thank you very much for your participation. We have Jampi Ngoji, and you are, I think, going to talk to us about what you do, which is Justice, Development, and the Peace Commission of the Catholic Diocese in Nigeria. But also, you're very much linked to the, I would say, to the conference in Africa and the African civil society. So, Jean, you have the floor.
Madam Moderator, thank you very much. My colleagues have said what needed to be said. Mine is just a few bullet points in trying to conclude. It all started like a joke that United Nations is asking my people to say which kind of world they would like to live in. For your reminder, my moderator, my people were used to being told what is good for them, what they needed to do to achieve what is good for them. But at the end, they enjoy participating. They felt empowered. At the end of the day, what started like a dream, like a joke, has brought about the 17 goal and 196 target, and it became a serious business. Having taken you seriously, the political leaders who initiated this process, we now have enjoyed participation. We are no longer allowing you to let us now down. Madam Moderator, All the countries, all men and women of different races, from different continents, have come to believe and to show that they share a common world, even though with different historical responsibility. Collectively, Madam Moderator, we have come to terms with the reality that we must care for each other and nurture our common home for our children and our children's children, including the huge ecological debts owed the non-industrial countries that are paying heavily for what the industrialized ones are producing. Madam Moderator, the making of history can indeed also be a deliberate and political choice. Madam Moderator, the means to achieve these 17 goals are within our reach. What we need is a political courage to change those social, economic, and political arrangements that are making it impossible for the poor countries and poor people to emerge. This should be complemented by strong leadership across sectors, including faith communities, private sector, and civil society. We are indeed at a crossroads, and committed leadership alone and strong political determination will take us forward. Madam Moderator, and those of you who are representing the government, through you, we are talking to the head of state. We as the people have given you, our political leaders, this historical mandate. Commit the political power at your disposal to create an equitable world where each one of us will be and feel at home. 2030 is a future for all of us here in this hall. For our grandchildren who will be running around, the old men and women who will be in 2030, it will be their present as they will be figuring out what to do with the decisions we have taken today. We need a heart that sees the troubles of the world and realizes that that world will be lived by all of us. You cannot afford to fail this promissory note you have just signed in our presence with us as civil society and the private sector. Transparently, we must deliver the 17 goals in a sustainable environment and a peaceful society. Do not fail the poor. Please, do not leave any of us behind. God help us.
Amen. Woo! Woo! Oh my goodness, what a powerful session, I have to say. Oh, very powerful, refreshing, I have to say. And I'm so sorry that we don't have more time to hear more of you. But we're going to have 3 closing remarks that I think are going to be fantastic as well. Who doesn't know NGLS? Who doesn't know NGLS? You know, the United Nations Non-Governmental Liaison Services. You are so important, NGLS. We have to make you even more important in the architecture of the next generation of the United Nations. So, Susan, give us your thoughts, because you helped so much in bringing the civil society to these events. So, Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barcena. It's, I mean, my heart is kind of beating kind of fast right now because I don't really know what to say to the room full of you. I've been trying all year to just create the possibility for you to come and speak for yourselves. This is very emotional for me.
Don't make us cry, because, oh my goodness.
Let me just also admit I'm very sleep deprived, so I guess that's what happens. But the reason I'm sleep deprived is because I've been trying to uphold some values. And I learned these values together with you over the last 5 years. I didn't come to the UN as an expert in UN anything. I came to the UN because I had organized a big climate change demonstration in Copenhagen, and people were confused, how did it even happen? And so, because 100,000 people came on the street in a cold winter day and marched for climate action, so the NGLS in 2010 said, could you come do that inside? Could you get the stakeholders to work together inside? So I thought, why not? But then they said, okay, you have to work on climate finance. And I'm not an economist. And I never even read anything about economics ever in my life. So I was nervous, and so I just decided I would write everything down that the people who were to be consulted said, and I would study it. And this sort of birthed a new approach, because what I ended up doing is using your quotes to write the report and not putting my filter on it. And the report that I wrote was literally 100% of your quotes. And I gave it to the Secretary General's office, and they said, oh my God, this is amazing. Because they just really wanted to know exactly what you thought. And then we looked through it, and we saw that many of you who thought you had differences of opinions had a lot in common. And so this sort of created a little bit of space to bring some people together who had thought that they couldn't even be in the room with each other. So that was step one. The next, I did a couple of more consultations, but the next big thing was a big regional report that we worked on together with many of you, which is, you may also remember, is filled with a bazillion quotes. So by the time we finished that report, this is really what I come back to and why we're working so hard to let you all come speak for yourselves, is it became apparent that these reports were popular because they were quotes. And so you may as well just bring it. So we decided programmatically 1.5 years ago to say, we're putting our energy to try to come up with a model where you can spend more of your time here together with us in this environment. So to the mindset is one of humility and one of respect in order to uphold openness, transparency, accountability, and so that all of you can really feel that you're participating in these decisions, including the decisions about how your participation works. And some of it needs some refining, and we try to do that together with you. We're trying to be agile and adaptive. We also have to work together with security, with protocol, with OPGA, with the GA rules, with the member states, with the UN agencies. There's a lot to balance here. So we are grateful for the trust that you put in our office to try to help create that balancing. And I hope that looking ahead and where we go from here, in conclusion, is that you will keep that mindset going forward, whether it's me or another person. Keep using approaches that are accessible to many, lots of languages, accessible technology, telephone, not only internet, to enable all of your participation here together in the session. And in conclusion, I just want to acknowledge colleagues here from the Arab region, because we haven't had a speaker from the Arab region on the panel today. And so I recognize Dr. Danielle and also Najib from the National Observatory for Children's Rights from Morocco. And in terms of, as a concluding remark, where we go from here, they are doing exceptional work in Morocco to empower young women, girls, youth in a self-organized way. And they are going to be conducting already, for implementation on post-2015, a forum for young women in November in Morocco for international participation. So look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. So before we all disappear, let us hear from Andrew Griffiths, please.
Thank you so much. A few weeks ago, I met a group of people with disabilities in India. They were working on financial inclusion, on their voting rights, inclusive education, and on inclusive transport. All of these are SDG targets. The civil society activity is happening in many other areas: environmental protection, ensuring strong and accountable institutions, and gender equality. And all this activity tells me two things. Firstly, that the ambition of the SDGs is in line with what people want. And secondly, that groups like the one I visited are not waiting for a gavel to come down on international agreements before working to improve the world. The SDGs are, in many ways, about catching up with small groups like the one I met in India.
So we've been working on the post-2015 agenda for 5 years now, asking the UN to lead a participatory process, for member states to care about this agenda, and for CSOs to work on the agenda. Now, the process has been participatory, and the result has been stronger, been more ambitious. However, the reason that we worked so hard was not simply to have a strong agreement on paper, but to create meaningful change for those most affected by poverty and injustice. Now, remember, the purpose of the post-2015 agenda, Agenda 2030, we feel is threefold. Firstly, to enable coherence and prioritization of action. And secondly, to secure commitments to action. And we salute your government today for having shown those commitments. And thirdly, to ensure accountability for action via an inclusive, multi-stakeholder approach.
Now for civil society on the SDGs. We must shift our mindset from a national level advocacy that adds value to an international process to a new focus on national implementation and accountability. Civil society has to learn the lessons of the post-2015 process and not allow the power structures to shift back to the north. We must fully recognize that this is a universal agenda which demands an equal partnership between the south and the north. So that's what we're doing. We're working together to build a new campaign focused on implementation of the new agenda, holding the powerful to account for the promises made this week, and building a real partnership between North and South.
So it's been a long journey, and many of us will feel like this is the end, but this is wrong. I've got a baby girl, Layla, 34 days old, 2 days for each SDG. If in 15 years, Layla has not heard about the SDGs, then we're going to have failed. If in 15 years, some countries still allow the richest 10% to hold 85% of total household wealth, we'll have failed. If in 15 years we're still closing borders and shooting tear gas on those seeking asylum in our countries, we'll have failed. And if in 15 years we're still unable to participate meaningfully in the decisions which shape our lives, we'll have failed. So let us all be really clear. The work starts today. Let's go back to our countries. Let's work together to take the next stage in this journey that we've started. Let's build a world which is better, better for people, better for participation, better for planet, and better for all the Laylas.
My goodness. Andrew and Leo. This is the two guys that have been telling us about this, aren't you? Beyond 2015. So don't forget to take this, everybody, all right? Now, last but not least, never least, we have with us Amina Mohammed. And I have invited Philip to come here. Okay, he's not the president of Tanzania, but we might, why not, ask him to sit here. Please come here. So, Amina, what can you tell us? I mean, you have been here from the beginning. You have been the mother of this agenda. So come on. The mother, the sister, the daughter, and everything. So please tell us.
Thank you. The mother's just over there, Paula, who first talked about the SDGs in Rio. So let me just say that, you know, the thanks, this is where the English language fails you. There's not a word to thank you enough. Because this is truly a collective effort. Everywhere we have gone, whatever congratulations we've had for each other, because I think we really felt that we had come a long journey, but we had, on the evening of August the 2nd, and 2 months before, about 2 months before adoption, which I think is unheard of, our negotiators negotiate till the last very minute, adopted, you know, agreed this agenda. So all I can say that is your role ensured the ambition. We were so fearful of negotiating the lowest common ambition. So you gave us the ambition, and the ambition was for rights-based inclusion, action. It was always about action. Listen to the goals, their action, the targets, their action. So that really has been reinforced by civil society. We had big voices on the aged, on those with disabilities, the indigenous, context, amazing red flag letters, which really held the feet to our fire as we prepared different reports to try to get it done. We're still receiving feedback on this agenda and what isn't there and what needs to be there, even how we're communicating it. And I think this is why this process is different. It is open, it's inclusive, you've been there right to the end, and you're crossing the bridge into the next one. The action year has delivered 2 out of 3. We still have to deliver on climate change, because without the climate change agreement, the other 2 will really come to not much. By 2030, we're saying the glass is still half full. So the policy to action is really important. It has already started. It's absolutely incredible that people are talking about implementation already, heads of state. Incredible, I have to say, our member state from Sweden, I've never seen a government call to action. That's usually our word in civil society. So to see the call to action by government and strange, I would say, bedfellows, which represent the universality of the agenda. So different leaders that came up there are not from just one region or a part of the world, but they were from everywhere, saying that this is what they want to do for implementation. The UK, starting with the girls and empowerment and building on what we've done. The business trying to come in here with the business case of the SDGs, but for the first time seeing they're not all business men or women on that commission. In fact, civil society and others are there. And so I think that you really have gone a long way to trying to get us to close the gap between the world as it is and as it should be. However, I do want to finish on one thing. We've still got one knot that we haven't tied. It's the accountability. And that's really what holds this agenda together. What measures are we going to use? Where are the indicators? What's the reporting and the feedback mechanism that we want for this global agenda that should start at the country level, but at the end shouldn't burden the country level, should empower the country level? And it will include, if we say leave no one behind, we need the data revolution. Because if we don't know who the no one is and where they are, then we've failed at the first step on that one. So the unfinished business, please hold our feet to the fire on that one, because without it, the agreement isn't complete. There are 3 pillars of the United Nations. We're 70 this year, and everybody's been asking questions, well, how are you going to deliver this in conflict? How are you going to deliver this in this instance, in this context? The truth is we've recalibrated the development pillar, and we've done a really good job at it, but it will fail if we don't continue to strengthen the human rights pillar, and somehow we get the peace pillar right. Those 2 are still a work in progress. And if we can send those messages loud and clear, the development pillar will collapse under the burden of the failing other 2 if we don't hold all 3 up together. That's what we need. The peace, the development, and the human rights. All of it works together. Can't piecemeal it as with the goals. So the UN, we continue to try to support. There will be, all sorts of conversations around implementation. We should keep it open and transparent right all the way through to implementation. Just keep that open, transparent, inclusive, ensuring that we really get genuine representation for it. My commitment, of course, is I believe in what we've done. These 17 goals are a really good way of getting to where we need to get to by 2030. And the proof of that for me is going home in a couple of weeks to do it. So thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Guys, I think we need a standing ovation for all the participants. So let me ask you all to stand up, to clap, to embrace ourselves, to really celebrate. But please, don't stop you doing things, pushing. Please don't stop doing things. Don't stop ever pushing us, everybody. So let's get ready for what you said. Time to deliver, time to act, time to prove. Thank you very much to all of you.